Shalom. UN chief calls on all parties to commit to Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. Secretary General Antonio Guterres called Tuesday for all parties to commit to the peace plan for Gaza presented by the US president and backed by Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. The US president earlier said he was giving Hamas 3 to 4 days to consider the deal. He's since extended that, but to no avail. Hamas official told the BBC it will reject the Trump plan because it serves Israel's interests. Hamas leaders argue that by being forced to release all Israeli hostages at once means relinquishing their bargaining chip. The group is also opposed to the deployment of an international stabilization force in Gaza, which it views as a foreign occupation. He indicated Hamas would not disarm or surrender its weapons, a central demand in the framework. Hamas military chief rejects Trump's ceasefire plan and aims to keep fighting. Now, is the Western media going to freak out about this and get in Hamas's face? No, they'll blame Israel. So the terror chief, who holds the fate of the 48 hostages in his hands, of which most of them are dead, plans to continue the war with Israel. Al-Haddad's position is the strongest rebuke from the terror group so far after Trump presented his framework for a peace deal to be accepted by the end of the week. They will not accept it. And again, will the Western media freak out about that? No, because it's not Israel. Not far off threats, Israeli envoy says of Hamas capacity in Judea and Samaria. For those drinking the Kool-Aid of propaganda, West Bank. Danny Danon told the UN Secretary Council that Hamas rocket factories in Judea and Samaria are hidden workshops of death on our doorstep. The same threats that were allowed to fester for years in Gaza are bubbling up in Judea and Samaria, Danny Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, told the Security Council. He added, it is time to move beyond speeches, theater, and spectacle of last week's General Assembly and start facing reality. Will they listen to Danny? No. Cuts. Hamas must free all hostages and disarm, or Gaza will be destroyed. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said the decisive phase in the war against Hamas was now advancing full speed. Drones smuggling thousands of illegal weapons from Egypt into Israel. But Egypt wants to say they're neutral. They're trying to keep the borders closed and everything just nicely, safely buttoned up, but they're smuggling weapons into Gaza. Since the start of 2024, Israeli security forces have seized over 1,200 illegal firearms linked to drone deliveries, along with 3.5 tons of narcotics and dozens of exotic animals, including monkeys and lion cubs, smuggled for black market sale. In the midst of all this chaos, you're sitting outside and you hear a lion cub go over your head. Or a monkey. Does it even begin to make sense? Israel shifts towards food self-reliance amidst boycotts and global supply challenge. Israel's Agriculture and Food Security Minister established a national strategic system to monitor potential risk in food imports. The decision comes amidst growing boycott calls against Israel and a growing recognition that the nation must reduce its reliance on imported food products. The country imports over 90% of its fish and grains, as well as about 80% of its legumes, peanuts, nuts, and oilseeds. Approximately 60% of all beef consumed in Israel is imported. So it's a real problem. If the world decides tomorrow to turn off the taps on food going into Israel, they're in a bit of a crisis. So it's a really good move that they're waking up and deciding to be self-reliant and make sure that they can function in the midst of what they can clearly see as writing on the wall as the nations come together and plot a thing against them that will force them to make a deal, a covenant with Des. Israel thwarts Palestinian attempt to pave over biblical city of Gibeon. Mentioned repeatedly in the book of Joshua, it is where Joshua made a covenant with the Gibeonites and the site of the famed battle in which the sun stood still at Gibeon and the moon in the valley of Ayalon. Israeli authorities prevented what they described as a deliberate attempt by the Palestinian Authority, the guys making themselves look like the nice guys at the UN, that they want to be in control of Gaza when this is all said and done. The guys who pay terrorists, pay for slave money for killing civilians in Israel. Those guys. They set out to damage a major archaeological site in the Binyamin region. The operation carried out on Monday this week targeted PA engineering crews who were preparing large-scale infrastructure work at the biblical city of Gibeon, the site of the great historical and biblical significance. According to the IDF forces and the Binyamin Regional Council, excavators and concrete materials intended for use at the site were seized. Officials said the attempted work included pouring concrete, clearing ancient terraces, and preparing asphalt surfaces, actions that would have caused irreversible harm. And this is not the first time. The PA has no genuine history in the land. The Palestinians have no genuine history in the land. Israel does, and the Bible tells you as much. And time again, in the areas they control, because of these stupid treaties and things, they have constantly sought to destroy any and all archaeological evidence they find as much as possible to delegitimize Israel's claim to the land that the Bible talks about. Many times around the Temple Mount, they'll find rubbish being thrown out, and in that rubbish destroyed archaeological evidence pointing to the temple periods and the kings of Israel that have been dug up and destroyed to hide the identity of the land and to try and legitimize the Palestinians' identity in the land. Pretty much, again, like trying to legitimize Wakanda as a genuine thing instead of a made-up thing out of a comic book. That's exactly the situation we have now. And then the president of Israel, Herzog, went and had a conversation with Charlie Boy. And this was just days before this latest anti-Semitic attack that occurred in that country, and asked him to please speak to all the countries that he's the power of and talk to them about this anti-Semitic rise that's appearing everywhere. So much good that did. Anyway, continue to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray that the scales fall from their eyes, and pray that their hearts of stone become hearts of flesh. Pray that they discover Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and various other places in the Tanakh that point to Jesus Christ, many, many places, and that they realize who Yeshua is, in the hopes that they can receive him as their Lord and Savior, and skip out on the impending Daniel's 70th week, Jacob's trouble that lies at the door. Our hearts should be aching for these Jews that have still not seen the light, while there is still time to skip the worst time in human history that is coming, that is at the door. God bless. Keep looking up. Shalom.